Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're walking through Elemental Shaman single target for the Midnight Prepatch. Just to start off, I have to say that the Prepatch balance is a little bit janky right now, with it being kind of all over the place, but looking forward to the Midnight Beta, Elemental's actually sitting at the higher end of the damage spectrum as a whole in single target. Also, I know I made a video about Shaman as a whole, but that was more of a broad guide, so this one's more of a pinpoint focused on single target, where I'm going to go over the core gameplay, the actual rotation, and specific talents you need to be aware of going into Midnight. Before we jump into the talents, I want to take a second to just zoom out a minute and talk about the overall goal of the build and how single target and Elemental actually work right now. And honestly, it's pretty simplistic. Most of your damage comes from your grandmas and grandpas, which is just a fun way of saying your ancestors. Whenever you cast a spell and they're currently out, they also cast a similar spell. So the entire philosophy of this build is built around the basic concept of getting as many casts off as possible. And yeah, I know that's basically true for every DPS caster in the game. Just press more buttons faster! It's not exactly groundbreaking advice, but for Elemental, it's specifically more important than usual. Every time you cast a spell, your ancestors also cast a spell. So the more casts from you directly equals more casts from them. On top of that, all of those casts also have a chance to summon additional ancestors. So if you're missing globals, your damage is doubly suffering, effectively missing 2 to 5 casts depending upon how many grandmas and grandpas you have out at that time. More casts means more ancestors casts, means more chances to summon ancestors, and more ancestors simply means more damage. That's the core mindset behind the build. We're trying to maximize how often we're casting and avoid wasting globals so both you and your ancestors get the most value out of every second of the fight. But with that foundation in place, we can now move into the talents and talk about how we actually support that game plan. So this is the single target build I've personally settled on for the Midnight Prepatch. The big idea behind the setup is pretty simple. Single target Elemental now is very Lava Burst driven. A lot of your damage comes from how often you're casting Lava Burst and how hard those Lava Bursts are hitting. Because of that, we lean hard into the fire-focused build and take basically every talent that buffs Lava Burst, which ultimately boils down to 2 very important talents. The first of which is Molten Wrath. This is a flat 15% damage increase for your Lava Burst. There's absolutely zero gameplay change tied to this compared to Master of the Elements, which also makes it a very beginner-friendly talent choice. Lava Burst is already one of your most important buttons, so taking a talent that just passively boosts it by that much is massive value. There is the talent choice node between Master of the Elements, which can be strong, but given that Lava Burst is doing the majority of the heavy lifting in your damage, it's not really comparable in my opinion. Molten Wrath is just way more consistent and way easier to get the full value out of. The second talent choice is Purging Flames, which adds another 10% damage on top of your Lava Burst. Aside from that, it is also worth mentioning that it does add some cleave potential to your build. Unlike other classes that get free passive cleave damage baked directly into their single target builds, Elemental actually has to make a strict choice on between single target and AoE or cleave in our single target build. Lightning Bolt for single target, Chain Lightning for cleave or AoE. You don't get to cleave for doing single target rotation, just like Warlocks or Priests get to. Even though this is primarily a single target boss driven build, Purging Flames lets you spread your flame shocks on up to 5 additional targets when you play it correctly. This means every 15 seconds you get to blast all of those bums with meatballs and gives you some added value which you otherwise would ignore in this single target spec. So while it's not the reason we pick up the talent, it's a nice little optimization bonus you can utilize when it comes to cleave fights. Now the next talent choice I want to talk about is actually a lightning focused talent, and this would be the choice node between Herald of the Storm and Fury of the Storms. Specifically, we're looking at Herald, which reduces the cooldown of our Stormkeeper. Even though this build prioritizes fire damage, Herald of the Storm is way more important than it looks because of how important Stormkeeper is to your overall damage loop. Herald of the Storm reduces the cooldown of Stormkeeper, and when you press Stormkeeper, 2 really important things happen. First, it summons an ancestor, and second, it gives you 2 instant cast lightning bolts or chain lightnings. Both of those are things that feed directly back into the core goal of this spec. More Stormkeepers means more ancestors over the course of a fight, means more casts during your ancestor window, and more chances to summon even more ancestors. It's as simple as that. Now the last talent choice I want to talk about is the node between First Ascendant and Premonitions. Premonitions. Both of these options are viable, and which one is better really depends upon the length of the fight. First Ascendant reduces your Ascendance cooldown down to 2 minutes. That means you get to press your biggest cooldown more often, which makes your damage profile way more consistent and gives you more burst windows over the course of a longer fight. Premonitions, on the other hand, keeps Ascendance at its normal 3-minute cooldown, but it buffs the window itself, increasing its duration by a straight 3 seconds and giving you a 20% haste buff while active. So between the two, the trade-off is pretty simple. First Ascendant gives you more frequent, smaller burst windows, while Premonitions gives you fewer but bigger burst windows. In a perfectly tuned raid environment with long, stable boss fights, Premonitions can actually be the better option. The problem is, this is pre-patch, and it's definitely not perfectly tuned. Balance is all over the place right now. Things die really fast, and a lot of fights don't last long enough to reliably get the full value out of a 3-minute cooldown. So in real gameplay in the pre-patch, First Ascendant ends up being the more practical and more consistent choice most of the time. But the short, easy answer between these two options generally comes down to this. If the fight lasts anywhere between 3.5 to 4 minutes, Premonitions is the better option. But anything outside of that 3.5 to 4 minute window, and you're better off with going with First Ascendant. But now that we've covered the talents, let's talk about the rotation. Your number one priority is sending your cooldowns Stormkeeper, Ancestral Swiftness, and Ascendance on cooldown. They all have different cooldown lengths, so they won't all perfectly line up every single time, but the goal is pretty simple. Whenever Ascendance is available, you want Stormkeeper and Ancestral Swiftness with it. Whenever Stormkeeper or Ancestral Swiftness comes up close to Ascendance, you want to hold them briefly so you can stack them together. The whole point here is to just bundle as many of your more casts into that window as possible. Whenever you're outside of your Ascendance window, you simply send your Stormkeeper and Ancestral Swiftness on cooldown. Priority number 2 is spend your Maelstrom with Earthshock. For a beginner, that's honestly all you really need to know. There is not a ton to optimize here, and you really shouldn't overthink it. But if you do want to squeeze out as much as you can, there is a slight optimization you can make. Try to sit around 80 to 100 Maelstrom most of the time and spend that Maelstrom at around 120 to 140, being very careful not to overcap. Sitting in that middle range gives you some flexibility, so you'll always have enough Maelstrom banked where you can fire off an Earthshock for that instant cast when you need to move. Not completely necessary, but if you want to optimize, that's one way you can do it. Priority number 3 then comes down to maintaining Flame Shock and Lava Burst. It is as simple as keep Flame Shock up on your target and send Lava Burst as soon as you have a charge available. You never want to sit on Lava Burst charge because then you risk letting it overcap with Lava Surge procs. So pretty much just send them as soon as you get them. Flame Shock is also super important not just because of the Lava Burst procs, but because of the talent Inferno arc. This increases the damage of your Lightning Bolt by 10% to Flame Shock targets, which is what you'll be spending the remainder of your globals on. So pretty much outside of any of those windows, you just spam Lightning Bolt. Or Chain Lightning if it's Cleave. And one thing that isn't necessarily a rotational thing, but something I wanted to quickly mention here is Spirit Walker's Grace, because this button matters way more than people usually realize. Elemental Single Target specifically is very sensitive to movement. Every time you have to move and can't cast, you're not just losing your cast, but also your grandpa's cast, thereby throwing away a bunch of value from the whole more casts, more damage loop. So try to get in the habit of using Spirit Walker's Grace as often as possible. Use it proactively instead of reactively, whenever you know movement is coming up, during mechanics, or specifically, use it inside your Ascendance window so you can keep casting throughout your burst window. The more uptime on Spirit Walker's Grace, giving you more real casts, the smoother your rotation is going to feel, and the more damage you're going to do over the course of a fight. To wrap this all up, I want to bring it back to the core focus of Elemental and Single Target, getting as many casts off as possible. More casts means more Ancestor cast, which means more chance to summon Ancestors, and more Ancestors means more damage. If you can manage that, your meters are going to look pretty good in Single Target, no matter what you're doing. Like I mentioned, pre-patch balance is still a little weird, and things are probably going to change going into midnight, but this setup gives you at least a really solid baseline that you can build upon. I'll drop the talent string and UI stuff in the description, and if you've got any questions, or you've been testing anything that feels better, throw it in the comments. I'm always down to talk about my favorite class. But that's all I got for today, so thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.